Welcome. This video is going to focus just on the sine and cosine trig ratios in right triangle trigonometry. There's actually three of them. There's sine, cosine, and tangent. I do have a video that just focuses on sine, so if you want to slow it down, go look for that one. And I have another video that does sine, cosine, and tangent all at once. So kind of wherever you're at, this might be the appropriate level for you. You can decide as you go along. Couple things about trig. First of all, I have a bunch of videos about right triangle trig, so you can kind of go through them. There's a video on how to label a triangle, just completely on labeling a triangle. There's another one on how to choose when to use sine and when to use cosine when you're solving a problem. And then today we're just going to work on sine ratios and cosine ratios. One thing to note about this, when you have a right triangle, and they ask you to find the reference angle will never be the right angle. So you can just ignore the 90-degree angle as far as if someone says, hey, what's the reference angle? It won't be that 90-degree angle. Here is the mnemonic device for right triangle trig. Sine, so the SOH means that the sine is the opposite over the hypotenuse. The CAH tells you that the cosine, or is a reminder that the cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. And then the TOA is telling you, or is a reminder that the tangent is the opposite over adjacent. So when I was in high school and I learned trig, especially on my standardized test that I had to take or any math test, I always wrote SOHCAHTOA at the top of my paper, because for me, if I have it written down somewhere, it's easier for me to just look at it, be able to see it instead of keeping it in my head. So if I put it down on paper somewhere, boom, I don't have to go back and process it through in my brain. So that's just a recommendation, but don't feel you have to. The other three, sentences here are just the steps that we're going to go through. The first step is to identify the reference angle. So let's do that. Let's look at our triangle below here. The reference angle, as I said before, won't be the 90-degree angle. So how do we know which one it is? It's in our problem. They're asking us to find the sine of z. So the z is the reference angle, and in the triangle, I actually want to circle that. I do that because, again, the less that I have to keep in my brain, the better off it's going to be for me, and the more chance I'm going to have an accurate answer. So now I can look at my triangle and quickly see where my reference angle is. Step 2, label the hypotenuse, opposite, and adjacent sides. So again, I do have a video that's completely just for that. So I'm just going to go through it quickly, or more quickly here. The hypotenuse I know is always opposite the right angle, so I label that with an H. My opposite side is opposite the reference angle, so I label that with an O. My third side is my adjacent. It's next to my reference angle, so I label that with my A. So I have my hypotenuse, opposite, and adjacents labeled. Step 3, write the appropriate ratio, reducing if needed. So the problem that we're dealing with here is they're looking for the sine of z. That means that I'm going to be using my SO part of my SOHCAHTOA. So I need to put the opposite over the hypotenuse. Okay, so the sine of z is equal to what? It is equal to my opposite, which is 36, fraction bar, over my hypotenuse, which is 39. All right, so this should be my answer right here, but I do know as a math teacher, especially, it comes to my mind really quickly that 3 goes into both of those numbers. So I need to reduce this answer. 36 divided by 3 gives me 12. And 39 divided by 3 is equal to 13. So the sine of angle z is 12 over 13, and that is what they're looking for an answer. They want that reduced fraction. Okay, look at these. And I know we're just starting off here, but if you suddenly feel really confident, or maybe this is just a review topic for you and it's come back to you, you're more than welcome to just hit pause, do a couple problems on your own, and then hit play and see if you got them right. All right, our top triangle here, we have the cosine of x. So again, step 1, what is my reference angle? Well, my problem is telling me to find the cosine of what? Angle x. So I'm going to circle that as my reference angle. Now I'm going to label my triangle. I'm going to need the sides labeled. So opposite the 90 degrees is my hypotenuse. Opposite my reference angle is my opposite. And the third side is my adjacent. It's next to my reference angle. So I've labeled them. So now again, I'm looking for cosine. So cosine, when my mnemonic device up here, we don't need the TOA today. Cosine is the A over H. So my adjacent is 20. My H is my hypotenuse, and that is 29. That cannot be reduced, so I'm done with that problem. All right, let's look at this bottom triangle. Again, what is my reference angle? They're telling me the reference angle is C. So I'm circling that on my picture to make it really obvious. Now I'm going to label the sides of my triangle. So opposite the 90 degrees is my hypotenuse. Opposite my reference angle is my opposite, and the third side is my adjacent. And again, I'm looking for sine. So the sine of angle C is going to be what? It's the O over H. All right, so O, my opposite is 10. My hypotenuse is 26. These are both even numbers, so I know that I can reduce it, divide each of them by 2. 10 divided by 2 is 5. 26 divided by 2 is 13. So my answer is 5 over 13. Okay, notice that we're both these problems have sine. So let's just work one-on-one. And again, anytime you want to hit pause and try them, there's 2 more problems, I think, after this slide. So reference angle is A, because that's what they're asking for. They're looking for the sine of A. So A is your reference. We're going to label. Hypotenuse is opposite the 90. Opposite is opposite the reference. Third side is my adjacent. Sine is opposite over hypotenuse. So the sine of A is equal to opposite over hypotenuse. My opposite is 24. All I have to do is look up there. It's already labeled. My hypotenuse is 40. I know that 4 goes into each of these numbers. So 24 divided by 4 is 6. 40 divided by 4 is 10. I haven't fully reduced it. I still have an even number over an even number, so I'm going to divide them each by 2. 6 divided by 2 is 3. 10 divided by 2 is 5. And it's okay to reduce in steps like that. What I missed back here is that 8 actually goes into both of those numbers. It just didn't occur to me at the time, but that's no worries. My final answer is 3 over 5 for that problem. All right, let's take a peek down here at this one. So this one they're asking us for the sine of Z. So Z is our reference angle. Go to label. 37 is the hypotenuse. 12 is my, is my opposite. And the third side is my adjacent. Sine is opposite over hypotenuse. My opposite is already labeled, so I know that it's 12 on top. My hypotenuse is already labeled. I just got to plop that number in. 37 can't reduce with 12, so I am done with that problem. All right, last 2 problems. So the top one here, we're asked to find the cosine of Z. Z is the reference angle. Then step 2, label up the sides. There's my hypotenuse. There's my opposite. There's my adjacent. Cosine uses adjacent and hypotenuse. The adjacent goes on top. So I have my adjacent labeled as 8. My hypotenuse goes on the bottom. That is labeled as 10. Again, I have 2 even numbers here. 8 and 10 are both even, so I can divide them both by 2. That's reducing. 8 divided by 2 gives me 4. 10 divided by 2 gives me 5. So my final answer, the cosine of Z, would be 4 over 5. Let's see. Our bottom and last problem here, cosine of X. Circle X as the reference. Label up your sides. 17 is the hypotenuse. 8 is the opposite. And that leaves 15 as the adjacent. I'm not sure what I just did. Let's label that with an A, not an O. And again, we're looking for cosine. So cosine is, again, A over H. So A is 15. My hypotenuse is the H, which I have labeled, and on the picture it's 17. 15 and 17 cannot reduce. So the cosine of angle X is 15 over 17. If you've done any of this where you're asked to give the sine or cosine ratios from a calculator, you get like this really long decimal. So these might like not compute with you. Like, why am I getting fractions? Well, if you took your calculator and did 15 divided by 17, that would give you that really long decimal as well. So that's kind of how they connect together. All right, I hope that this helped you figure out the difference between sine and cosine. How do you find those ratios?